Hey guys, welcome back to the Results Junkies podcast. After a couple of weeks away from the mics, we are back to talk to you about AI. And we're going to be talking about both sides of the AI equation, the large companies that are making money off of AI and how they're making it off of consumers and big business. Mr. Singh, how the heck are you?
I am clearly better than you right now. No, I'm good. You know, we got school starting. We got my girl's going into middle school. My next little guy went into kindergarten. The two little ones are going into preschool. So we're just sort of in that first week shuffle of just trying to figure out what the new normal is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I remember that. I'm thankful that we have older kids at this point, but my son started his first day of high school yesterday, time of recording.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
How are you, man? You're, for anybody watching on YouTube, we see you in another hotel.
I know, something new for a change. We're by the time this episode drops, we will hopefully fake wood, no, real wood, knock on wood. I've opened up a flagship Five Guys Burgers and Fries on the Strip. So I'm hoping that by this time next month we'll have set the North American sales record once again. So it's a little bit of a crazy time, but
I love
we're
how
expecting.
how nonchalant you just said that. Like we'll just break the North American sales record. That's I like that. I like that.
Well, for what it's worth, in what can only be described as a very circumstantial, full circle moment, literally 20 years ago, next month, I set the North American sales record for Five Guys well before you knew me in Tyson's Corner, Virginia, when they opened up the extension on that
Really?
mall. Yeah, yeah, we shattered the existing record at that time, and I fully expect that next month we will shatter the existing record again.
Okay, so I'm gonna put you on the spot, and then you can take a pass if you can't talk about this. But given that our audience is probably more, you know, the tech-enabled entrepreneur and stuff like that, are there, knowing what you just said there, are there any parallels? Like when you talk about this idea of just blowing out sales records, are there any sort of high level bullet points, one, two, or three things that are applicable to this audience? So when we talk, so like talk to me like I'm the, you know, like nobody else is listening. What can I take away from what you've done there to potentially break these sales records that I can maybe apply to my own business?
Yeah, I mean, I think like when you think about culture, we spent the last, call it 75 days finding 40 people in our operation that we believe are, incredible culture leaders. And we hired 120 people off the street and gave them the quick indoctrination into our culture to put together a staff of 150 or 160 that will do, almost 10 times the volume of any of the other Five Guys that I've operated in the past decade. So it was weaving together our existing culture and making sure that we had very key people who were culture warriors who could explain to a bunch of people who were just coming in off the streets for a job why it was important to do it the way we asked them to do it.
It's pretty neat. I
And we'll
like it.
know we'll know on Wednesday if we were or Monday if we were successful.
That's great. I love it, man. That's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, so a little bit of housekeeping. Show at resultsjunkies.com is how you can email us. He's at Paul Singh on all those social media channels. I am at Pizza in Motion. And in a rare moment, I am going to hand the microphone over to you for teeing up the first topic in terms of Satya's memo. We're going to talk a little bit about Microsoft and some comments that their CEO has made in regards to AI and hiring. And we're going to analyze, some of the other pieces out there. And you and I didn't discuss this in pre-show, but I think once you're done discussing the Satya stuff, I think maybe we touch a little bit on the article that I sent you on Meta and their pause on hiring after going mercenary style through pretty much anybody who wasn't nailed down in the AI world. But yeah, like tee up what you were talking about in pre-show about Satya's comments and where you think things are heading in this land grab for the consumer side of AI.
Well, yeah. Well, so just to set it up, Microsoft laid off about 9,000 people a couple months ago now, a couple weeks ago now, and that in of itself is not surprising. I'm sure we all
No, they've
read
got a
like,
couple. They would have 250,000 employees. So, like, yeah, this
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah. And we,
small
and
number.
we even during COVID, right? We were watching was it layoffs.fyi? So layoffs are, unfortunately, they're a thing and they happen, right? This one is really fascinating to me though, because Microsoft is insanely profitable. So traditionally you would see layoffs at if you ask the average person, like, what kind of company makes a layoff, then they would say, well, if you're running out of money or whatever. In this case, Microsoft is incredibly profitable and still laying off 9,000. And, of course, as things happen, as these things do, the memo that he sent out was leaked. And what's really fascinating is he's laying off 9,000 people. He's doing it at the time when the company's the most profitable. And the thing that I find really fascinating about it is that it makes you wonder how much more you're going to see this in the future, because he doesn't even hide it. Like, not that he has to hide anything, but like, he's very clear about this idea that, you know, that the AI enabled employee is more valuable in the long term. And so, to your point about like laying off anybody that wasn't nailed down, I would maybe revise it and say it's almost like laying off anybody that isn't able to or willing to embrace some sort of AI in the role that they're in. And to be clear, I imagine if we like go and talk to these 9,000 people that were affected and we said, would you like to use AI? I'm sure they would all say yes, but I suspect the jobs or the roles they were in became redundant as other people and other roles became more enabled. So anyway, just really, really fascinating. And in this article that we'll put the link to, the conclusion I thought was really interesting. He says, the Microsoft memo portends the new reality of the tech industry. For years, the sector has been generous to its employees, offering unheard of perks and placing a premium on skills such as software development. AI, however, inverts that relationship. And I thought that was really fascinating. And I want to tie it to the other topic that we'll talk about here in a minute. But let me pause there for a moment. I can't recall any other profitable company making layoffs like this. But here's a little dig. I'm a little younger than you, so maybe you've seen it before. Have you?
I certainly haven't that I can think of. I've read about it in call it the previous iteration of industrialization, the assembly line, that sort of stuff, where you had wholesale industries that were based on people working with their hands, and then their jobs were converted to something that was much more technical. I think the thing with this surprises me a little bit, and maybe this is me being naive, is, when I think about Microsoft as a company of technologists, I'm just trying to figure out where they lay the 9,000 people off from. Like, I don't think they're laying off, admin assistants and stuff like that. So they're laying off maybe junior or mid-level people whose jobs are less relevant, or, more to your point, they're not succeeding with the tools. So like, if you sat me down today and said, you can't build a spreadsheet the normal way you build a spreadsheet anymore. You have to build it using Anthropic to set up your formulas. I mean, you'd probably have to fire me just because I don't have that skill set with those tools yet. But I'm pretty proficient at Excel, and so but somebody who uses those tools can probably make spreadsheets 30% quicker than me. So I'm guessing that's how they're culling the herd, because I don't, even though they have 250,000 employees, I don't really regard Microsoft as a sort of company that has bloat in the technical sectors. My guess is that they have bloat like any large company, but it's probably not in technologists or coders.
Yeah, I mean the memo, and again, we're just reading it from the outside, right? But the memo repeatedly uses the words learning and unlearning.
Mm-hmm.
Learning and
Yep.
unlearning. And if
Yep.
you kind of like, if those are the tea leaves that we have to read, then what it suggests is that some of these employees' skills have become outdated.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of investing in their training or retraining of these people, it was just easier to hire or retain fewer workers with the expertise they needed. It's a really fascinating kind of, well,
It's
actually, let
also
me pause.
possible, to be clear, it's also possible that when they're saying learning and unlearning, the way I interpreted that is maybe they've been trying to work with a set of people who are just not performing. If they're, I mean, like in a 250,000 person company, you could have a subset of 10 or 20,000 employees where it's like, okay, well, these 1,000 or 2,000 over here are really excelling with the new tools. These 1,000 or 2,000 really are not. And we're just not going to take the time to invest another 6 months to see if they'll get there.
That's right. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Well, it'll be interesting to see if other profitable companies begin to go down this path as well. I think in hindsight, I'm sorry, when people look back at this, it will be really fascinating to see whether it'll be interesting to see how this gets thought about 6 months from now, 6 years from now, that sort of thing, because in the moment right now, it seems like a pretty bold move. It's one of those things where it just seems like, you know, I it most CEOs of very large corporations like that don't make a big bold move like that without some sort of underlying pressure. And this seems like a forward-thinking bet. Now, it could blow up in his face. Who knows, right? I mean, it hasn't in the last month, but it could. But this is a really fascinating move, and if it does work itself out, it'll be interesting to see if other companies take this same approach as well. So, I don't know
Well,
how
and
to predict the future, by the way, but well, we'll see where it goes.
yeah, and I think there are other companies that are taking very different bets. I mean, you take Facebook as an example, Meta. They've been trying to buy up anybody they can in the AI space and lock up these employees. And I think it's interesting that we haven't necessarily seen the same thing from others in terms of a human resources arms race. I don't know if that means that Microsoft feels that they don't need more top technologists in the AI space, and Facebook is somehow behind. But I think we do see different strategies. I can't imagine that Zuckerberg is bringing in all of these people because he feels like it. I imagine he also feels an intense amount of pressure of being left behind.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that, and I mean this with all the respect in the world to the folks that got hired. I think part of the reason you hire those people and pay them exorbitant salaries and compensation packages is to give your company an advantage. That's certainly
Sure.
probably the bigger part of it. But I think it's also worth calling out that by giving them these pay or these compensation packages that are huge, they've effectively taken those chess pieces off the table for anybody else.
Hmm.
And only a company like Meta can do something like that. Or, well, let me
No,
rephrase.
no. I mean, I think
Very
there's
few companies.
yeah, exactly. I think there's a handful. I think Microsoft, Amazon, and Apple all could have jumped in and played in this pool.
Yep.
Facebook seems to be the one that's saying we're going to lock up as many humans as possible. It doesn't mean there haven't been other strategic hires. It just feels like Facebook is
Yep.
relying more heavily on human resources. And I can't tell if that's because they feel like they're behind or because, to your point, they want to take as many pieces off the chessboard as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, time will tell. Either way, those employees are about to make a ton of money. And so we'll see. We'll see how
Yeah.
it goes.
Yeah, and alongside this, you shared this article about ChatGPT coming out with this very affordable model in India for individual users, and there's another article that we'll share in the show notes about the enterprise side of Anthropic. And I think you shared some thoughts in pre-show that I thought were interesting, and I wouldn't necessarily say I disagree, but see differently. And I wanted you to share that with the audience, just in relation to your thoughts on, for lack of a better term, the land grab of consumers using AI.
Yeah. I mean, I think let me start this off with a little bit of like personal story or whatever. It was like the mid 2000s when I became aware of Silicon Valley. I mean, I just sort of built my stuff out here and didn't really know anybody there. And it wasn't until maybe 2007 when I went to Silicon Valley for the first time and started seeing what that was all about. And that was around as now my memory might be a little messed up nowadays, but as I recall back then, that was one of the that seemed like the early days of enterprise adoption of a lot. Like you had companies like Salesforce just blowing up and other companies blowing up like that. And I remember, hanging around like Palo Alto and some of these other places, some of the growth tactics that people would talk about back then that was wild and crazy and new back then, but probably old news now, was this idea of sort of land and expand. This idea that, man, if you could make a consumer grade product, get it involved at with some users. I'll give some examples in a moment, and then use that, make it sticky, and then when they go back to work the next day, have an upgrade path where they could do something. So the example I'll use is wikis. Like I don't think anybody uses a wiki these days, but
90% of the audience either just tuned out or Googled what a wiki is.
they have no idea what that is. But I remember with wikis, one of the strategies, for example, with wikis was like, okay, let's go after, organizers of kickball leagues and like little leagues and things like that, where they could kind of have a little page and they could update it with, who's playing and when and whatever. And that didn't sound like something you could monetize, but it was never designed that way. They would use these wikis to then like get all these people organized. But eventually what would happen is these people would go to work the next day. And of course, through like some of the earlier days of email marketing and stuff like that, the little drip campaigns would come of like, hey, you could use this in your work. And so then these users would have the ability to create a new wiki and use it to organize maybe the little project that they were working on, or maybe the little team they were organizing, right? And this is before, so instead of selling top down, this was really about like that land and expand kind of let's go bottom up.
Yeah.
And at the time, a lot of CIOs were getting really nervous because software was coming in, and they'd never had that before because most large companies at the time would buy things like SharePoint and then deploy it down into the enterprise. So anyway, now let me tie it back to these articles that we'll put out. So ChatGPT just released a new, I guess, level called Go, which is about $5 US, but it's really only available for the Indian market. At least at the time of the recording of this, it's primarily designed for the Indian market, and that's because I think the exchange rate, right? So like the ChatGPT plan that maybe you and I pay for at $20 US, that's essentially the equivalent of like 2,000 rupees in India. And anyway, point is the Go model is much more affordable and things like that. I think that it's not. As soon as I saw that, it took me back 15 years to what I just described in Silicon Valley. This idea of whoever gets the most consumer users inevitably has the best chance of then pushing up into the enterprise. Now, I'm going to say something that's going to make me sound very stereotypical, but I'm just using this as an example, right?
I can't
But
wait.
imagine that you want to go sell something like one of the enterprise accounts of OpenAI to maybe a large Indian BPO, outsourcing company like Infosys. Would you rather sell top down into the organization, or do you go bottom up through the organization where you have maybe the employees of that company using their own ChatGPT Go kind of tool? And there's, by the way, this is probably not an or, but right, it's going to turn into an and. But the point is, though, is that like I think ChatGPT Go is a really fascinating kind of land grab in the Indian market, and I'm making it very simplistic, right? So let me pause there for a second before I tie in that other article, because you mentioned you may or may not agree with me on some of this stuff. So let me pause, get your thoughts.
Yeah, I'll segue us into that article because I think that article sort of emphasizes where I disagrees is not the right way, just like sort of like seeing the market maybe a little bit differently. I think so. The article that we'll share as well is an article about Anthropic including their coding module Claude Code in enterprise level plans. And so like right now, what happens is you have some level of rate limiting on a lot of these plans, and those are applied in different ways, whether it's slowing down your queries or giving you less information. There are limits to the paid plans, and Anthropic is including these coding modules at the enterprise level for a fee, and I couldn't find any exact numbers, so I don't know what the magnitude is of this add-on, but in theory, I mean, these aren't unlimited plans, but effectively what I can say as an enterprise user is, okay, I've got, 100 coders on this, and I'm going to give more resources to Paul this month because his project is bigger than, Jane's. And then, Jane has a bigger project next month, and I'll change those allotments. I think two things. First off, I think the inherent nature, like we've seen some articles out there about, search indexing, the, Google, the Grok chats and stuff like that, and this stuff's starting to become public. I tend to think that large enterprise level companies will take two approaches to AI that I think run, and controvert to your thought on building from the bottom up. One is I think there'll be some level of security of query, like they'll want to make sure that their queries are in some sort of a walled garden. And so they'll likely dictate what AI tool the people who work for them use. And two, I think from a cost standpoint, if these enterprise plans become more widely available, I have to imagine that there is a significant discount for quote unquote buying in bulk. And as opposed to the individual plans. So I think small and medium-sized businesses, this strategy can really work for ChatGPT. You train somebody to use ChatGPT, they're very comfortable with it. They go to work at a software development house or video production facility or whatever, and they have knowledge of the tools and such. I think enterprise level companies, you'll probably have to pick up their tool set, and I think it just goes back a bit to the Satya comments of you'll need to conform to their model, whatever that model is in house. And you now will sound old again. In the olden days it was like, well, like I can code in C++ and I can code in Java, so I'm more valuable. And to some degree, if you're really talented using these tools, you'll be more desirable for the Microsofts of the world to hire you. But if you're using a tool that's not like if Microsoft isn't using ChatGPT for some reason in the future, and you're not familiar with whatever model is the in-house model, you probably have less of a chance of being hired.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so there's probably a lot to cover there, but I definitely, I don't have any reason to disagree with anything you're saying there. I think it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. One thing I will kind of say though is that, and I'll just use something you said earlier. You mentioned, I forget how you said it exactly, but you said like, you're an expert at Excel,
Yes,
right? And so,
dinosaur that I am.
so think about that for a moment, by the way. You're an expert at Excel. Now, if I sent you a Google spreadsheet, which some of the spreadsheets we've worked on together are Google spreadsheets, you're still capable of using them, right? 'Cause
Sure. Yeah.
like
Yep.
90% of the concepts kind of line
Yeah.
up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I bet you, tell me if I'm wrong, when you have to like create a new spreadsheet for something you're working on, you default back to Excel on your own, right?
Oh, 100%. And we just dealt with this in opening the restaurants. I'm building spreadsheets in Excel and I'm importing them into Google Docs so everybody can see. And I know that I'm going to lose some of my formatting and theming and stuff like that. But in terms
That's
of being
right.
able to build it quickly, I'm most proficient in
That's
Excel.
right. And I think we're all like that. For
Hmm.
example, we're all just as human beings, it's change is hard for all of us, me included, you included, right? And
Yeah.
so when I think about this idea of ChatGPT Go and things like that, this idea of just expand as fast as you can across the consumer base because the friction is lower is a really fascinating strategy because I think ultimately, let's say that person, I'm going to just make it up. Let's just say you and me, I think you still pay for the OpenAI, whatever that $20 plan is,
The
right?
$20, not the two. I was on the 200 briefly and just
Yeah.
wasn't
And
getting the
and I
value.
and I pay for the $20 one as well. I mean, and so I keep it open. I use it, right? But
I did, by the way,
the
I did sign up for Perplexity as well because
okay,
there are some spreadsheet stuff there, and then this stuff might be available on ChatGPT as well. But some folks I know were able to build some tools isn't the right word, but build some queries to for
yeah,
all intents and purposes, nothing to do with work, but how to automate finding great deals using miles and points
yeah,
using
yeah,
Perplexity. So I now have two
yeah.
subscriptions.
Well, but the thing is, like, let's just say let's just play the hypothetical here. So you're using ChatGPT and
Yep.
Perplexity. Let's say you then decide to go join a different company. Right
Hmm.
now, let's agree. Both you and I are probably unemployable. Nobody wants to hang around with us. But anyway, let's
That's why
just
we're
say,
entrepreneurs.
yeah, yeah, because we're unemployable. Yeah. Oh, I got to talk to my therapist about that. But anyway, the thing is, if you did, and let's just say they forced a new tool upon you, you would probably use the tool because there's probably some threat of getting terminated or whatever, but you'd
Yeah.
still default back to the tool that you use more often or the one that you feel more comfortable about. And I think this is just like as we think about ChatGPT Go and things like that, I think there's something really fascinating about this kind of land grab because I think that if it goes well in a place like India, I can't imagine they wouldn't expand it out to other markets, right?
Right.
But now it ties to this other article, for example, where I think Anthropic is now, I think you brought it up already. Anthropic is like rolling in Claude code and stuff like that. I think when we think about enterprise, there's all this like rhetoric out there in terms of like AGI and like how much benefit these tools can have for us and right. But I'm still not comfortable letting OpenAI's like agent go out and book my flight. I still want to pick my seat. I still want to
Sure.
like know that I paid the right price, blah, 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 right? But enterprise is where I think we're going to see real adoption. And we're already seeing it, right? Between Satya's memo, laying people off. So yeah, enterprises and companies in general all have more structured data. It's easier, like I can trust the machine to like make the right decision based on structured data. And so my point here, I think poorly articulated, of course, is this idea that number one, I think we're going to see much more for all the talk of like, AI being able to change our lives at the consumer level radically. I'm not saying that's not going to happen, but I will say I think we're going to see the most impact of it at the enterprise level or the business level way, way, way sooner because that they already have structured data, right? Like even with my email client, I can say show me the email that I sent to Ed about this. That's a lot. Like that
Well,
right there saves me like 15 minutes of querying to find that one email.
yeah, and I think like what we need to find out is how companies are going to like the email one is a unique one that's a much narrower band. But what if what if it said like here are all our financial results for the past 10 years by unit, and our model, Claude, Anthropic, Grok, ChatGPT, whatever, has all that loaded, and your individual account doesn't. And so,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
like you'd have
Yeah.
to like if you told me I couldn't drag my P&Ls into Excel and they were only going to be in Google Sheets, well, I'd have to learn how to be really proficient at Google Sheets really quickly. So I think
Right.
that like there's some of that wall guard and stuff, but I think the other side, I mean, like this is gonna sound maybe it's gonna sound irrelevant. Maybe you're gonna tell me to shut up, but you familiar with Nespresso coffee machines?
Yeah. I that's what I use at home. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so do you have the newer one, the Virtuo or whatever,
I think it
or you're
is. It's
cheap?
no,
The
I
bigger
bought it.
pod,
Yeah, it's about that big. Yeah, I bought it like 2 or 3 years ago.
and the pods are really expensive, right?
I mean, you're gonna judge me. I just have it on subscribe and save. I don't actually know what I pay for these things. I sound ridiculous.
All right, so pin this for November when I'm over in Europe. I learned this last year while my daughter was in college. Well, when you're over in Europe, I'm going to ask you
Okay.
to look at your Amazon subscribe and save price for Virtual Pods, and I'm going to show you from a Nespresso store in Europe how much they cost in Europe. And I actually had a long conversation with somebody who works for Nespresso about their model, and effectively the machines are relatively the same price in Europe and in the U.S.
Yep.
The pods are 70% cheaper overseas because the people over there won't pay what the US will pay for a pod. It costs them the same to make the pod in Europe and the US, but the only way to get more machines out, the razor blade model, was to discount the daily or the ongoing fees enough to get that adoption. And, for lack of a better term, this India plan, because ChatGPT does have a free plan in India. By introducing a lower level paid plan, it feels like they're trying to your point, like get people locked in and then just, continue to pay that. Okay, here's what we think you'll pay on a monthly basis. And let's get you
That
locked
is
in a low number, and then hopefully it can get you to upgrade the coffee machine further down the road.
that's probably that is exactly what's happening for sure. You know,
Yeah.
the like for just given the currency or the currency differences, $20 to you and me in the U.S., $20 is not
No,
gonna
that's
break the
lunch.
bank, but
Yeah.
$2,000 or 2,000 rupees. I'm sorry, $20 would be the equivalent of. I can't do that. A
A lot,
thousand.
a lot of rupees.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's like times 50, right? So
$20 in rupees. Let's see
it's a
what
thousand, I
let's see
think.
what XE says. 1744. 17 almost
1744, yeah. And if you were to now Google like the average income in India, you'd get, you'd see how low that is. So the point is though, is that, yeah, I mean, that's exactly what's happening. It's get the product out there, reduce the friction to get them, lock them in on it, get them used to the queries, get them used to the
Yeah.
interface. And every single day that they use it more, it becomes that much harder for them to change to something else.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Uh,
Well,
I think I will say, just to tie it all back to the kind of people that probably listen to this. I think what's important here is just think about like how these kinds of distribution models could apply to whatever it is you're working on. Because that's ultimately why I end up thinking about this stuff, is I bring it right back to this idea of like, what are we doing at Strata, and what are some of the portfolio companies we've invested in doing, and what are things we can learn from the distribution models, and yeah. Anyway, just really really fascinating to see how they're going about it. So.
yeah, no, I really want to see what the next 12 months of all these different AI models look like, and where people adopt and how it affects enterprise. Like enterprise is one thing. I'm more interested in small and medium sized businesses because it's where I work on a daily basis, as you. So I really am interested to see how those size businesses, adopt these things.
Mhm.
And in a brief moment of vulnerability to close out the show, I will just say I have a confession to make. My daughter discovered coffee last year at school, and her roommate had the Nespresso machine and the really expensive pods, and I learned that the pods were that much cheaper in Europe. So I broke my cardinal pry my bag out of my cold dead hands rule, and I bought the cheapest suitcase I could find in Europe.
And checked it.
and I filled it with Nespresso pods, and I checked it to bring home to my daughter for her to
See, the mental image of you standing at the baggage carousel like every other normal human being like me, that just, it's incredible. It's like we should have had a camera crew on this. Like, this creature is blind, dumb, and mute as you stand there.
I'm not really that.
I imagine if we could pull the security footage from the Dulles Airport baggage claim, probably you'd just be standing there. Just, how does this machine work? What is this? What is this device?
Well, you've now given Jeremiah multiple things to use for the cold open this week, and for that I'm thankful.
I like it, man. Well, I hope by the time this thing comes out, I hope that you sell many burgers and fries per second.
Me too.
I think that'd be a really fun billboard or dashboard to watch at some point.
Calories per second consumed, yes.
That's right. Calories per second. I like it. I like
Yep.
it. All right, man. Well, good luck out there. I'm half joking, half serious. I will see if I can sneak over and hang out for an opening. We'll see.
If you come out, I'll raise your cholesterol, and I'll get you drunk too.
Listen, I'm training for a marathon right now. I kind of need all the calories I can get. So,
I'm your
dollars
guy.
per calorie ratio is probably highest at your restaurants, and I'm thankful.
I'm your guy, man. I got you.
You're my guy.
Come carve it up. Come carve it up.
That's right. All right, man. We'll safe travels out there and have a lot of fun.